I was listening to classical music this week. This is where this starts.
Okay.
And an artist came on who I was relatively familiar with, but like I had like this memory somewhere. You know when like you remember something, but it's buried and you have to dig it back out?
Oh,
and
yeah.
I was so pleased when I did. So I had this memory. I'm listening to classical music. Paganini comes on, right? Do you know Paganini? Famous violinist from Italy, right? Like around 19th century, like 1800s, right? Okay.
Yeah,
So
I know him. Yeah.
All right, cool. A lot of people know Paganini, and they know Sonata Number 6 and a couple other ones, right?
I like
So
Paganini with
comes on.
vodka sauce.
That is not what it is.
That was worth
Odie.
it. That was worth
That's
it.
not worth it. That's racist. Not every Italian's name is a dish. Odie, you racist. Anyway, so I'm listening to Paganini. It does sound like a pasta dish. And as I'm listening to it, I'm like, I have a weird memory of this. And we're talking about zombies this week, and I looked it up, and here's an amazing thing about this guy. He was one of the most talented violinists ever, but he was so prolific for his time that people were like, this is suspiciously good, right? They were like, this man is so good, we don't trust him as a corporeal being, right? He also had, or rather, we're relatively sure, all but properly diagnosed, he had Marfan syndrome. Now, Marfan syndrome elongates your body and makes it so that your joints are extra flexible. That would probably make you a good violinist, right? Longer fingers, more flexible, right? But we did not, medicine as we know it didn't exist back then less than 200 years ago. Less than 200 years ago. Medicine didn't exist like this. So Marfan syndrome, they're just like, his body's weird, bro. Like, you go to the doctor's like, I don't know, you got a long baby. This is a long baby. This baby's real long. I don't know what's wrong with it. That was the diagnosis, right? You've got a long body. So Paganini, being so good and being mistrusted, like, in a sense, because he was so good, the superstitions that existed around that time, especially in Italy, right? The capital of the Catholic Church is in Italy.
It is. I think it's in Vatican City.
Well, the Vatican City is, it's its own thing,
It's
but
its own
in
country.
Italy.
It's its own country.
Inside the borders of. Stop it!
I don't
telling
want to get
a
hate
story.
email from Italians.
Oh, you're gonna get hate email from Italians now? And it's not going to be about your pasta sauce comments?
No,
all right.
it's going to be about you thinking that the Vatican City.
So he people were just like, this guy, obviously, this guy made a deal with the devil. This is what's going on. This guy made a deal with the devil, and that's why he's so long and weird looking, and that's also why he's so good at violin. That was the assumption. Now, Paganini, he is on his deathbed in like the 1840s, right? I'm jumping ahead. So he's on his deathbed, and they send out a priest. The Bishop of Genoa, I think it was, sends out a priest. And Paganini, he's a trooper. He's like, I'm not dying yet. He's like, I got a couple more rounds in me. I'm probably going to go on tour again. You guys saw I was just all over Europe. I've done it, right? He doesn't want to kick the bucket, so he refuses his last rites. And that's a huge thing in Italy back in the day, right?
Oh, yeah.
He's just like, I'm not doing it. And like the priest is like, what? You don't want the last rites of God? Like, and he's like, no. And he dies a week later, but they weren't able to get the priest to him in time to give him his last rites. And so everybody just was like, that's it. We knew it. It was a deal with the devil. That's why he refused last rites, because he would have been damned, right? Like he would have just burned alive on the spot. That's why he refused it. So the Pope weighs in on this, and he's just like, we're gonna deny this body proper burial. Like, it's
why
just not
lie
happening.
and be like,
Well,
oh yeah, no, it happened.
Well, I don't know. So anyway, so the Pope just goes, no, you can't bury that. And they're like, well, what are we gonna do? So his body stays in its house for like almost 2 years. And then like with
Weekend
their
at
like
Bernie's.
well, and so
Weekend at
so
Rigatoni's.
then they're petitioning Weekend at Rigatoni's. So then they're Weekend at Paganini's. So then they're petitioning to bury the body, and they're like, just move it to a cellar, because that's underground. If you want to get it underground so bad, just put it in a cellar. So it moves to a cellar and it's there. This body, I'm going to jump ahead because it's the beginning of the podcast. This body gets moved around for 50 plus years. At one point, in the most Italian thing ever, it's rumored to have been, I don't know the validity of this, I'm pretty sure it's valid, but like at one point, it was just in an olive oil factory.
I believe that.
Yeah,
I believe it.
At one point, it was just seaside. It finally, they get the body to Parma, and they're like, all right, the church is like, all right, you can bury it, but he doesn't get any show or anything. Remember, he made a deal with the devil, and people are like, we don't think he made a deal with the devil. And here's a fun fact. 3 Italian wars of independence were fought while this body was just being moved around. Like,
nice.
I love this story. And then finally, a very famous Czechoslovakian violinist convinces his grandson Attila to exhume the body once more, to have a viewing for it. And the purposes of this viewing, like the subtextual purposes are like, hey, let's show everybody that like he didn't just get dragged to hell by Satan. So they bring the body out, they have a viewing, this violinist is there, he's playing, and then finally, the church is like, all right, we'll give him a tomb. Like, but 50 plus years, they're just moving this body around, and you can only imagine, because the term actually exists at the time, that at some point somebody probably thought it was moving and called it a zombie. Like, I can only imagine someone being like, it's the zombie of Paganini. Like, isn't that great?
I love this story because real quick,
yeah,
I have a very, very, very similar story, but I'm going to summarize it in like 3 sentences.
Okay.
10 years after Abraham Lincoln was assassinated,
yes,
a group of counterfeiters, because at the time the Secret Service was created to combat the flow of counterfeit money, counterfeit currency in America.
Yeah.
In America, it wasn't to protect the president. And this guy, I think his name was like Big Jim. His buddy who created all the counterfeit money went to jail for 10 years. So he was like, you know how I'm going to get my buddy out of jail and get my counterfeit business back up and running? I'm going to steal Abraham Lincoln's body, and then I'm going to negotiate with the government to give me $100,000 and my buddy out of jail. And if you want to know that entire story, because I just listened to it, I'm going to plug, go listen to Do Go On. It's a podcast I mentioned before. I think it was like their last or second last episode was all about this topic. I listened to it yesterday when I was recording games. Mm-hmm. Incredible story. If you love, like, picture this movie with like your 4 main people. Picture it with like your 4 favorite comedic actors, and just picture this as like a comedy movie, because that's literally what this whole heist is. The whole thing is it's as ridiculous as it sounds. It's incredible. I love that you pictured that way, because the thing that delighted me the most about remembering the story about Paganini is I can only picture it as like a Wes Anderson film with a series of vignettes about people moving or just being around this dead violinist body, right? Yeah, like year 20, and it's like Edward Norton like shows up for a minute, like dressed all dapper, and he's like, "What is this guy doing?" You know, I can see that.
Exactly. Oh my god! All right,
love it.
Well, good. So we're both coming up with movies.
Oh yeah,
and they're gonna come out with 20. They're gonna come out in 2025 because we're on. I've got some news for you, Odie. As of right now, because you have not paid me yet, I'm on strike. I'm a writer, and I'm striking again, and I'm gonna see who I can get to back me right now.
Well, I'm an actor, and I'm on strike because I've been pretending and acting to like you. Bam! How about that? Bam! I'm getting paid. Matt Pfeiffer is paying me. Are you going to
unionize people that don't like me? All right.
I'm okay.
Okay, you ready to clap?
I am.
Yes, perfect. Every single time. Welcome back to the Unpop Podcast. I am your host El Capitán todo siempre en el Club Babalu esta semana. Kevin Miner, he, him. With me as always is.
Odie.
With me as always is.
ODIEMATTHEWTHEMTHECOOK. Every time you drag out yours, I'm going to make mine stupid.
Okay. What did you spell? Matthew.
Odie Matthew. They/them the cook.
Oh.
I didn't even put the S on the last name.
I was like,
I forgot a letter of my own name.
What are they spelling? Yeah. All right.
I don't know.
All right. Anyway, so last week, as I refreshed your memory, you mentioned that you know more about zombies than vampires. And
Yes.
I said, let's talk about it this week. So here we are. We're going to talk about it. Now, you've prepped where they begin in media, and you have a lot to talk about when it comes to that. Do you know the etymological history of the word zombie dating back to Sumerian culture?
Okay, so no, but since we just
Yes!
talked about this on the phone, I was thinking what we could do to make it interesting for the listener. Is I was thinking you could go through all of the history of the word and origins and everything that you prepared, and then when you get to whenever you're done with yours, because I don't think it's going to get up to mine, we'll start at 1968, and I want to go over what I like to call the Godfather of zombie movies, because it's a trilogy of zombie movies. The first two are really good, and the last one it's a movie. I'm not a fan, but we'll talk about it. And then I figured after we go over those three, because that kind of like set the groundwork, and I can go over some of the history and like behind the scenes, then we can just talk about some of the zombie movies that like have come up.
Oh, for sure. All right, cool. So here's a speed run of the history of the word zombie. Sumerian culture, the ancient poem Gilgamesh, which is like, let's call it the first horror story in all of history. The undead come out. Now, these aren't corporeal, but they do influence culture moving forward, prompting people to come up with their own mythological undead, right? So as that moves forward in time, the Greek end up having what are known as the vrikolakash, right? And the vrikolakash, this is more where like vampire comes from, but because vampires and zombies haven't been delineated yet, it's kind of a little bit of both. Like, it's an undead body, it comes back, it's bothering the living. Is it eating people? Is it sucking blood? Who knows? Like, it's just messing people up from beyond the grave, right? Now, this is something that has come alive again. And as this gets spread out into like Serbia and Germany and stuff like that, we end up having like vampire, right? Vampire, upir, opir, like opiri, all of those, which are the roots of vampire.
Sounds like
zombie,
the Seven Dwarfs.
Yeah. Zombie ends up coming from French culture, but specifically French colonized Congolese. And the way that came about is, I'm going to jump back a little bit more one more time. The Norse mythology had the word draugr, right? So we had the word draugr in Norse, which is walking again. It's an undead body. It's walking again. Usually regarded as being a ghost that has unfinished business and has like taken over a dead body and is moving again, right? So this is like really kind of where zombies start to come out. Now, the French take that and they take the present participle of the word revenir, which means like to essentially walk again, right? To return, right? And they make revenant, right? So revenant is the first French form of this, right? So revenant is the original, like, if they saw like if somebody said that they claimed that they saw a zombie back then, they would be like oh revenant, right? Like they would be yelling that. Now they yay colonialism, not really. They're down in the Congo, and in Congolese there's a combination of the word zombie, which is God, right? So like, or spirit, right? It can be like multiple use. They take a little bit of that word, and then it's believed that it was also mvumbi, right? Which is another word, and they've combined those two to make zombie, right? So zombie finally makes its way back via French Congolese culture into Europe, and then gets recorded by the British poet Southey. I think it's Jonathan Southey. But he is the first person in history to use the word zombie. It had already been around for a little bit, but he used it ZOMBI,
Like written down
a poem.
like
Yes, written.
documented.
The first written document that was popularized in any means that would have spread the idea of a zombie, right, around, was this guy Southey. And what I really like about that is showing the delineation. Zombies and vampires come from a similar place, and it's only in the 1700s and 1800s that they start to kind of spread out and become different. And it's just because of where the mythology shifts to and comes back from, right? So like vampire comes back from like Germany, which would highlight why they look the way that they do. Zombie comes back from the Congolese, right? And it comes back through like French foreign culture. And it almost was regarded as like a zombie was almost treated as like a brand new phenomenon, even though Revenant had already existed. Like Revenant, right? Pretty cool.
Interesting.
Yes.
That
is as far as I've got on that.
Oh, that's as far as you got?
I mean, well, that's as far as I need to go, because after that we jump ahead to modern culture, because in that time it kind of like, you know how things bake into culture. So like vampire and zombie are kind of like baking themselves into culture in the 1800s, and then they're being popularized. They end up popping up in literature. You know, you have Dracula, you have Frankenstein was kind of treated as a zombie, right? Like even
monster.
Like back then he was a revenant, right? He was something that was brought back to life. And I love that there's all these different versions and that they combine, but like modern culture, where you're going to start, is where we start to see the real the typification and delineation of zombies away from other types of revenants or spirits that have returned.
Well, let's pick it up in the 1920s. And actually,
this
isn't about zombies specifically yet. Let's talk real fast about just the rise of horror as a genre in media as a whole.
Oh, yeah.
So 1920s, you've got the start of motion pictures, you know, few years earlier, depending on who you ask. You know, the first movie, whether it was silent or just like the guy on the racehorse with moving pictures, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So movie studios start to pop up, movie actors start to pop up. So 1920s, Universal Pictures starts creating what we now know as the Universal monster movies, right? So
yes.
In the 1930s, you had the very popular like Invisible Man, Dracula, Frankenstein, and then from that you ended up having like The Mummy, The Bride of Frankenstein, you know, Son of Frankenstein. You had Dracula Returns. All of these monster movies were really, really popular in the 1930s and up into the 1940s. By the 1940s, we pretty much, like, the movie industry as a whole had already like evolved so much that a lot of the subgenres that we know now, even sci-fi, were starting to become popular. So in 1940, do you know who blessed this lovely world by being born?
No.
George A. Romero, the godfather of zombies.
Oh, yeah.
So he was born in 1940, right? And so pretty much, according to him, a lot of these Universal monster movies are like what inspired and like kind of interested him in the genre. So in 1968, at the age of 28 years old, he, on a budget of like $100,000, creates the first well-known and what is widely considered the first zombie movie, Night of the Living Dead, right? And that movie was fantastic because on a budget of $100,000, it made something like $30 to $40 million back in 1968.
Whoa.
So like you got to think that's like the equivalent, like that's the Blumhouse of its day, right? Like low budget,
for
high
sure.
reward. So with Night of the Living Dead, that really like put the idea of the dead like returning to life in cinema. And what's cool, and this Night of the Living Dead is going to start the trilogy of movies that I hinted at earlier, which is Night of the Living Dead, 1968, Dawn of the Dead, which is 1978. I believe it came out in 78. I think it's 78, 77, 78. And then Day of the Dead, which is 1983. And what's really cool about these is the gap between them. And I'm going to talk about like why there's such big gaps between these movies. But 1968's Night of the Living Dead really did a good job of, for one, it's all taking place on a farmhouse. It's shot in black and white, which is kind of unusual because color was already a thing in the 60s. So that was a stylistic choice and a budget choice, shooting it in black and white. But there's a lot of themes in all three of these, but especially in the first and the second one, that really like are pretty unique for the time. Because when was the last time you saw like Night of the Living Dead or like Dawn of the Dead or Day of the Dead?
Oh, when I was a kid.
So in Night and Dawn, from what I remember, and it's been a little while since I've watched them, but there's a lot of racial themes, because if you remember in Night of the Living Dead and Dawn, one of the main characters is a person of color, which again, now you'd be like, yeah, it's no big deal. But for 1968 and 1977, 1978, that's a pretty big deal to have a main character not only be a person of color, but also be romantically interested in a white woman. Like that was just, and one of the cool things about George A. Romero in one of the interviews about making, I think it was the making of Day of the Dead, he even mentioned, he was like, look, like I know that in a lot of my movies, like it's very like in your face with the themes. And he's like, and that's what I wanted. I want you to know that like, this is how I feel and this is in my movie. Here it is. Like, and he admits that like a lot of the like, symbolism and stuff in his zombie movies, specifically those three, are, you know, society's view on people of color, society's view, and we'll get to it, but like Day of the Dead, why I think Day of the Dead kind of falls down, and we'll get to it, is because it's a lot of people just sitting around talking about like the morality of the zombie apocalypse, which is cool, and it's like the first time that people really, like you get that a lot in zombie movies now, but like that was the first time that people really sat around and were like, well, what's the morality of the situation? Like, is our humanity still alive? Like, is any of this even so? But Night of the Living Dead was a huge hit, and it put George A. Romero. It's only his second film. He had a student film before that, and then it was this. And again, he's 28 years old. So Night of the Living Dead did a really good job of bringing zombie culture like to the forefront. In the 10 years between Night and Day, George A. Romero made a bunch of other movies. The one that I think is probably most notable and also had a remake was the movie The Crazies, which is zombie adjacent. Do you know that one? Okay.
No, I don't know that one. Oh, wait, The Crazies. Yeah, but that got remade. Yeah. Okay. Yes.
Yeah, not bad. I don't know a lot of George A. Romero's other work in like the 1968 to 1978 time period, other than The Crazies, which was 1971. I'll be honest, like besides the three main zombie movies from George A. Romero, I'm not super familiar with his work. I never watched. He like in the years leading up to his death, he pumped out a lot of really bad zombie movies like Diary of the Dead, Land of the Dead, and Another of the Dead, which I think kind of fell flat. And your boy John Leguizamo is in one of those. He's in Land of the Dead.
Yes.
But anyways, so Dawn of the Dead, right? Not
keep going.
Okay.
Yeah.
You look confused. So Dawn of the Dead is the first zombie movie to take the concept and show it on a different scale. And it is in the same universe as Night of the Living Dead, but in Dawn, it's no longer like the rural communities fighting against, some that are struggling around. It's survivors. It opens up with a SWAT team raiding a housing district of low-income Puerto Rican people, because this movie, it takes place in Florida. And you mentioned on the phone that the roots of the word zombie are Haitian and French.
Yeah, well, it becomes French Haitian, yes.
French Haitian. So there is a character in Dawn of the Dead who is a reference to those roots because he has like a Southern Caribbean, like almost like a Haitian type accent, right? And it's not even the actor's real accent, which is really funny. And that actor in an interview even said once that like he has to do the accent in front of fans because people don't believe it's him unless he does it, which I think is really funny.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, so it opens with like obviously like the SWAT team just murdering all these people in this housing unit because, again, George A. Romero being like, people of color being mistreated, here it is, like fucking look at it, and I love it. And then it just, for those of you that don't know, like I'm not going to spoil it because I still think that these 3 movies are worth watching if you're a fan of horror. They're not scary by any means, but they are definitely staples in the genre that are worth watching, kind of like Halloween and Friday the 13th. But they go to a mall, which really funny and fun fact, in 1978, shopping malls were still so new that in the movie when they're flying into the shopping center, one of the characters is like, "What is that?" And the pilot's like, "I think they call it a shopping mall." And it's like, wow, they was so new that when the movie came out, they had to tell the audience what it was.
That's nuts.
It's really funny. And also, the only mall they could shoot. So George A. Romero is from Pennsylvania. So Night of the Living Dead was shot in Pennsylvania, and Dawn of the Dead is shot in a mall in Pittsburgh, outside of Pittsburgh. And again, because malls were so new, they only had 8 hours to shoot at night in the mall to get all the scenes they wanted. And they were really worried that with that being, such a short shooting day that they wouldn't be able to get it all done. But apparently extras kept showing up to be in the movie because they were just such big fans of George A. Romero because he was from Pennsylvania.
Oh, that's awesome.
So I thought that was really cool.
That is cool.
Another fun fact about Dawn of the Dead, which I'm going to insert here because I think it's a really cool staple of the horror genre. Does the name Tom Savini mean anything to you?
No.
Okay, so Tom Savini is probably one of the most proficient and well-known makeup artists and special effects artists in horror. He is responsible for probably every major kill in every major horror franchise from 1975 to 2005. He also directed the 1990 remake of Dawn of the Dead with George A. Romero's help, blessing, and writing. So because of his friendship with George A. Romero and working with George A. Romero on Night of the Living Dead, some of his other movies, but most specifically Dawn of the Dead, it put Tom Savini on the map as a special effects artist for the horror genre. And he's worked on the Friday the 13th franchise, the Halloween franchise, the Scream franchise, the Reanimator franchise. He's worked on Hellraiser. He's worked on Saw. He's worked on everything. Anytime there's like a practical effect or a practical kill, he's probably behind it, or his company's probably behind it. So I thought that was really cool. Yeah, really, really, really well-known makeup artist and also director and writer. So really fucking cool dude. But yeah, so and Tom Savini met his business partner on the set of Dawn of the Dead because they were zombies together. Because Tom Savini played a zombie for fun. That was in that was in Day of the Dead. My bad.
Okay.
Anyways,
I wouldn't know otherwise.
well, I do. No. So yeah, but Dawn of the Dead is an interesting look at it's kind of the middle movie, and you don't really get this in a lot of zombie movies because society hasn't fallen apart because there's still like communication with the outside world, but it's fallen apart enough where people are kind of on their own and isolating. And in Dawn of the Dead, you get this really nice, mall setting, and it's very like claustrophobic, and it's very like, it's kind of, and I think still to this day, and anytime you see a zombie movie, I think a lot of people are like, this is what I would do in a zombie apocalypse. I would, because it's in The Last of Us, right? There's an episode where Ellie and their friend go to the mall, and everyone's like, this is exactly what I would do if there was an infection. I would go hang out in the mall and like mess around. But at the same time, and the movie explores this, it's like, that's really fun for the first month, maybe 2, but then it kind of shows as time passes, like, then what? What then? Yeah. When the reality of it all kind of sets in. Yeah. And so Dawn of the Dead, I think, was really, I don't know, it's a really good zombie movie. It's probably one of my favorite zombie movies, even though, again, it's, from the 70s, so it's not like the most scary thing in the world. But I think it's really, really well done. I think the remake with Zack Snyder's missed the mark, mainly because the ending to the original is ambiguous. Like, they leave in the chopper, and it's kind of like, who knows?
Hold on. Did you just say who was the director? You just said
Zack Snyder.
And were the exact words "missed the mark"?
Yes.
This is what I'm here for, baby. I'm taking down Snyder.
Well, I mean, I think Zack Snyder has a 50-50 bag of movies. He's like Michael Bay. Some of his are hits and some of his are misses.
Did Michael Bay do Pirates of the Caribbean?
No.
Who did that?
I have no idea.
Okay. I don't know a Michael Bay movie that I love. He does like disaster films and stuff, right?
The Michael Bay movie that I like the most is probably The Rock with Nicolas Cage and Sean Connery.
Oh, that's a good one. I also don't. So Snyder, he does the zombie movie. He recently did another zombie film, right?
Yeah, the one in Vegas.
Zombie heist.
Zombie heist. Yeah,
movie.
zombie heist time.
Zombie heist time movie. Whatever it is, I don't know.
I don't remember.
Eccentric German guys here, like I don't know.
Army of the Dead. Yeah.
Yeah, Army of the Dead. There it is.
I hope you're ready for the prequel series of that movie.
Whatever. Who cares? Let's get in. Okay, let's get into this because this is a good history. We've touched on a lot of like the.
Well, I haven't gotten. Wait, hang on.
Pieces.
Let me get.
Okay.
I gotta get to Day of the Dead first, and then we can.
Okay.
Quickly,
get to Day of the Dead.
Okay, because then I'm gonna wrap up my trilogy real quick. So Day of the Dead is vastly different, and again has 5 years between dawn and day. Basically, Day of the Dead, and
because
why
they all
I
took
think
a break.
lot of, yeah, pretty much. Also, it
was a long coffee break.
That accent that I was talking about, it's in Day of the Dead, not Dawn of the Dead. But anyways, it doesn't matter.
Whatever.
Most of this movie takes place in a bunker underground. And again, the plot of this movie is there's scientists on this remote outpost underground that are being protected by the army. Same universe, but at this point, the world is so far gone that the themes that this movie touches on is once society is gone, what then? And there's a really good conversation. And it's also really interesting because a lot of the actors in this movie were actually stage actors. Like, they weren't movie actors, which isn't unusual, but it's kind of unusual for an entire film in the 80s to be made up of stage actors. So you can definitely tell, like, some of the actors are more experienced than the others. But there's a really, really good scene where these two characters are talking about it, and it's one of the scientists, and it's the helicopter pilot. And they're talking, and she's, he's like, what does it matter? Like, your work that you're doing, like, what does it matter? Because they're supposed to be trying to find a cure, like, trying to figure out how to fix it. And she's like, well, it's all we have left. And he was like, there is nothing left. He was like, the conversation kind of continues to be like, if us in this bunker are already, like, trying to kill each other because the army is being, the guy that took over is fucking crazy, and one of the scientists is literally, like, operating on zombies that are from the dead soldiers. It's like it's a morality movie, but like the whole conversation is, if society's gone and we're already trying to rip our throats out, like, what do you do at that point? If you want to help everybody, but everybody wants to just kill you or is already dead, like, what do you do? Where's the morality? If the whole world is gone, you'd want everyone to help each other out. But as we saw in Dawn of the Dead, there's a scene at the end where a bunch of people just come in and raid the mall, let a bunch of zombies in, take everything, kill a bunch. It's just because they can and they want to, instead of helping everybody. And that's kind of like the theme through all three. And it slowly builds up between the three, which is why I like it. And again, George A. Romero putting a lot of relative society themes in his movies and making them kind of in your face. Some points too much, but I think overall, these are three really good movies that laid the groundwork for all the zombie movies to come. I mean, George A. Romero is quite literally the godfather of zombie movies. So but yeah, that's where it all started. Those three, and it's interesting because when you think about like Day of the Dead, like that's the first time, like really, we saw zombie movies where characters sat down and talked about the morality of it, and you see that now, like hints and pieces of it, in like Walking Dead or whatever zombie movies are coming out. But
I mean, that's
that
what Walking Dead just devolves into, is right. It's like every episode's just like, well, who are the real monsters here, huh?
Oh,
it's like every episode of The Walking Dead after, I don't know, season 1.
Pretty much. Walking Dead never uses the word zombie. And fun
they
fact,
call them walkers.
Crawlers. Yeah, in the Dawn and Day, or whatever. Again, Dawn or Day, they say zombie one time. I can't remember which movie, but once.
Interesting. Okay,
yeah.
So really, so getting into it, the thing that gets me about zombies, and the thing, not in a bad way or a good way, just like the thing that I think about when I think about zombies is, as soon as someone starts talking about zombies, I'm like, all right, cool, well, which type, right? Because you have your classic George Romero type zombies that are like, they're slower, they're relatively brain dead.
Yeah.
And this is where the real delineation started, right? Like when zombies and vampires entered popular film culture, especially in the Americas in 1960s, well, even before that, 1920s, moving up into the 1960s, as they're evolving and they're being typified, and they're being put into different directions. Zombies kind of take on the George. You said he's the Godfather. They take on that sort of mindless, brainless. We're just acting. We want brains, right? I mean, some of them say brains. They say the thing that they want to eat. Some of them just grunt. But then you have, as it evolves over time, then you have the introduction of the fast zombies, right? And this kind of starts a little earlier, but the first time I remember zombies being fast at all, and it surprising me, was playing Resident Evil. Playing that video game, which is very much, I mean, you're talking about Dawn of the Dead, Day of the Dead. Resident Evil, the Umbrella Corp is super informed by those two movies,
Yeah.
Yeah, but then what they did was they were like, all right, well, these zombies definitely need to move a little faster sometimes. And what it is these bodies are being reanimated. So a cool thing that I want to put down is a revenant is a zombie and a zombie is a revenant. They are mutually interchangeable, right? They are mutually inclusive, those two terms. But sometimes, but not all revenants are zombies, in that sometimes if someone was talking about a revenant, they might be speaking about a spirit that's inhabited a dead body and not necessarily just a body that's come back from the dead, right? And I think a big thing that zombies kind of took on is that they are the unexplainably soulless, reanimated corpses that are feasting upon other humans, right? They become cannibalistic. And that's part of zombie culture that doesn't really 100% get touched on all the time, but it's that very specifically there, because they still need food, and what's the scariest thing for them to eat? Us, right? It wouldn't be scary if a revenant came back and was like, well, it's okay, I can still eat plants, I'm on a vegan diet, right? It wouldn't be the same. So you've got your slow ones that are hunting us down for brains, and then over time it becomes, well, they could just eat any part of a human, and then it becomes, well, they're also fast now, and then you get up to your World War Z, right? Where it's oh, this is the actual downfall of the entire world, and they're fast and they're piling onto each other, and they're even faster than you might imagine, And I like how over time we've stepped it up, but now there's been so much in popular culture that you just have different types that exist, right?
Even smart zombies that eat other people's brains and can see what happens to them, like in that TV show I never watched.
What is that show?
iZombie.
I don't know what that. Okay.
Yeah, the whole plot of that show is she's a zombie, and if she eats victims' brains, she can see and know what they saw before their death, and she helps people solve their brains, and then she gets to eat the dead bodies, so she gets to, it's supposed to be like a. It sounds bad even when I'm explaining it.
It sounds bad.
Probably.
I didn't even know this existed. Yeah. So you've got that, and then in video games there's the separation. I would say, all right, let's do this. I would say my favorite zombies are actually the Draugrs in Skyrim. You ever play You played Skyrim, right?
A little bit, yeah.
I'm just assuming you played Skyrim. So the thing I like about the Draugrs in Skyrim is one, they're using the classic term, which is amazing, because that's where the real beginning of the term zombie starts, is in Norse mythology. But I also like that it's not a blight upon the world. They're just in their crypts sleeping, and the only time they get up to attack you is if you're breaking into a crypt. Right? Like, so they are proper revenants in that they are the animated spirits of corpses. They still have, like, they can't speak, but, like, they're ready to just, like, kill you because you're breaking into their crypt. You're disturbing their rest, right? And I like that a lot, going back to, the vampire episode. I like when there's rules like that. Like, I agree with that. I love when there's rules. And they're not even cursed. Draugrs, they're not cursed. It's like part of, like, it's almost like an honorable thing to be a member of a crypt because you were part of, like, an esteemed company of warriors and you all got buried in the same place and all your treasures down there. And, like, if someone comes in, you got to wake up and fuck them up. You got to do it. You can't. That's part of the deal. If you're going to live peacefully in Valhalla, every once in a while, you're getting sucked back down and you're going to go kill somebody. Like,
I mean, yeah. Vacation, really.
I love that. And then I would say my second favorite zombies, just because I remember the first time, like, really loving this. 28 Days Later was probably the first zombie movie that I loved. Because I was like,
another good one.
It's so good. And it was like, oh, they're fast and strong. Why not? Right? Like,
it's a good one.
Yeah, and I like when it gets added onto that they're so fast and so strong and so mindless and not paying attention to pain that, like, they'll, like, literally break limbs trying to get at things, like, like the more visceral a zombie becomes, the more I enjoy them in popular culture. But you're like the expert on this. You know way more than I know. What are some of your favorite examples of different zombies that have existed?
Well, I don't know. There's a lot of zombies, right? So, like, you mentioned the slow ones, which I think the classics are. I think the classics are top tier. Personally, maybe just because they're the classics, I think that I prefer an overwhelming amount of slow zombies rather than an overwhelming amount of fast zombies. Because here's the thing: my problem with fast zombies is, I was turned into a zombie, and all of a sudden, I can run as fast as they can in World War Z. That makes no sense. I'm undead. I'm slow, alive. How am I fast when I'm dead? Because
how are you faster?
That, like, the eating humans thing is, like, does it make sense? Absolutely not. They're undead. They have no stomach. Even in Day of the Dead, like, there's a whole scientist subplot where he's, like, trying to figure out why they're undead and still can operate. And, like, one of the characters is like, what's it matter? Like, they eat us. Who cares if they have a stomach? The point is that they eat us, right? Like, and it makes no sense. But yeah, like, you need, like, I think that works. I think where zombie culture really starts to, like, dive into some insanities is when, and this is more prevalent in video games than it is movies, but when you start getting, like, exo zombies that are, like, undead people that had cybernetic enhancements that are now zombies.
Oh, yeah. I mean,
it's a little much.
That's definitely, like, more Resident Evil stuff. But, like, those games, they're like, how do we step it up, right?
It's Call of Duty mainly, like the zombie mode or whatever that they have. Okay. Speaking of Resident Evil, that is a zombie franchise that starts off very traditional and ends with zombie pterodactyls and mutant men and zombie hellhounds and clones and space and it's incredible.
Well, because they have to answer the question, how do we keep going, right? Like, and really, like, I think almost anybody who's played the games would agree. Resident Evil 2, best one. Like, there's a bunch of weird stuff in it, but the humans become zombies. They're not always fast, right? And then, like, the fat ones aren't fast. And then there's, like, giant crocodiles and all these other weird experiments that, like, the Umbrella Corp was working on. It was just, like, they were just, like, I love that the Umbrella Corp is just, like, this mixed grab bag of, like, bad experiments that have been unleashed upon Raccoon City, Like...
Yeah.
I love that part of that, just, like, the smallest bit of that is zombies. That being said, I do want to point out that Welcome to Raccoon City is probably one of my favorite zombie experiences. Like, I love there's a shorter amount of episodes. The way that they develop is pretty good. Everything seems to happen with good reason. They don't go like out of their way to like over explain too much, but it's good, man. I really liked Welcome to Raccoon City.
Was that the live action one?
Yes, it's a live action.
I've heard about that one. It's got really bad. It's got really bad ratings.
It honestly, like, it was good. Like, it wasn't. It wasn't bad. It just wasn't your typical zombie thing. Like they did all of the classics. Like, it was very tropey. But I appreciated that, and I appreciated that they took the idea of Raccoon City and they're like, here's what it looks like, and then. I like that. Obviously, the biggest example of, and these aren't zombies, but a zombie type scenario is The Last of Us. It's huge right now, right? Like a lot of people are into that. They're not zombies, right? They are they are myconids, right? So in my mind, when I saw that, like when I played The Last of Us for the first time, I was like, oh, these aren't zombies, these are myconids. Like they're living,
like fungus people.
They are living fungal organisms, myconids, which exists in D&D. So the only reason I knew that is because I had played D&D before, right? So I'm like, oh, it's myconids. But the thing that I like about that is, much like a living fungus, if you touch a piece of it somewhere, it knows where you are, right?
Yeah, I thought that was
like,
really cool.
I love that. And zombies just never get that. So even though I would actually say that The Last of Us, they are not zombies, although they are technically, they're not even reanimated corpses, right? They're bodies that have been hijacked. That's what it is. It's a parasite that it exists as a fungus that has taken over these bodies. So I love the plot is just like the world got warm enough that fungus wins. Like,
yeah, I mean,
what a good plot.
Speaking of all of this, let me ask you this question then: what origin of the zombie virus outbreak, pandemic, whatever you want to call it, do you prefer? Because I have a couple that I want to mention.
I mean, there's what's the really good one where it goes all the way back and it turns out it was just a guy who remember the movie? I can't remember the movie. It might have just been called Parasite or something. No, it wasn't called Parasite. I forget what it's called. But remember the movie where at the end it goes back and it was just a guy who improperly washed his hands while making like a pig dish? Do you remember that movie?
God.
I can't remember it, but that one's so good.
It's not Cooties, is it?
No, it's not Cooties, but it was like, I'll look it up. I would say that's definitely up there. I don't know why I can't remember the name right now, but it's got like a famous actress in it too.
I know which one you're talking about too, but I can't remember.
You know what I'm talking about. Yeah. So I love that one, but that one's like a little too real now. like it's definitely like, I like favorite. That. I really like The Last of Us, but once again, I'm going to put that aside and say that that's not zombies.
Doesn't count.
So as far as like zombie outbreak goes, I love the originality of the first Resident Evil. If you take away some of the stuff like giant spiders and other horror elements that they put in just to scare you as a video game player, right?
Of course.
Well, because that's what they wanted. They wanted the big jump scares. And what's scary? Giant spiders, like weird undead dogs and stuff. Like, so, like if you push that aside and you just have like hey, we're looking for a thing that's going to help people live forever and defeat disease, and then it turns out that what defeats disease? Oh, dying, and then this thing just takes over your body again, so you get reanimated, proper zombie style. I like that because it's just the human body coming back, and it turns out if they want to eat whatever, right? They'll just eat you. So I like that a lot, and then Skyrim. I like the Draugrs. Like, Draugrs are some of my favorite. And then, and once again, I would say, I love zombies in the Magic the Gathering universe. Like, this is another thing. Well, because Magic has done such a good job with horror elements, right? They have an entire plane of existence that's gothic horror, right? They have they have a plane, and in Magic on Innistrad, again, the plane, they have so they have Gisa and Geralf, right? And Gisa is black aligned, and so she actually summons zombies, right? Like classic necromancer style, right? So she brings dead corpses back. And then her brother Geralf is blue aligned, so he's a scientist, right? And what he does is he uses science to reanimate bodies. And they're two of the funniest characters. They almost brought down their entire plane with a zombie apocalypse one time because they band together and they were like, yeah, let's see who can be better at this and who's going to be ruler of Innistrad. And I love that they actually represent two different sides of the zombie culture, right? So you've got Gisa, who's like, I'm bringing bodies up from the grave. And she, however close she is to them, she can, actually feel their, soul and their essence and reanimate them. And then you have Geralf, who's like, I need my lab. And he, goes in and he's using electricity and stuff. And they've even worked together to fend off different things before. So I really love that too. And I love the way that they handle different zombies in that. They even have zombies, they have a mechanic for them called Decayed, which is after they attack at all, they're dead. They're gone. So I love that. Yeah.
Okay.
What are yours?
Fine. Well, the one that I think now, I only know this one bit. So I watched The Walking Dead up till season 3. I want to say. And I will admit, the first 3 seasons were pretty solid, but I know it falls off pretty hard. But in season 1 or 2, they go to the CDC place, and there's scientists there.
Season 2.
Season 2. And you learn that basically we already have the virus. It just doesn't kick in until we're dead. And I thought that concept of being it's already here. It was here before we even knew it was here. And the moment you die, whether you get shot in the chest or die of old age or have a heart attack or fall off a cliff, you're coming back if your brain's intact. And I think that's really interesting. Would have liked to have known personally a little bit more about where it came from. I'm definitely the kind of person, when I watch a movie with an outbreak, I want to know where it came from. I'm just always curious. Mm-hmm. But in terms of my favorite, I think I still have to stick with the OG Night of the Living Dead, which there's some news reporter lines in the movie that tell you basically a satellite crashed back down onto Earth. And it's implied that whatever happened to that satellite in space, space fungus or a space specimen or something, came back down to Earth and created this undead horde, which there's reference to in Shaun of the Dead. There's a reference to there's the same line in a news passing where it's a satellite coming back down from Earth. And I like the idea and the concept or whatever that something in outer space, the thing that we know nothing about basically, could be this thing that comes back down and makes people crave human flesh and still be able to operate as a mindless creature even when they're dead, is really fascinating and also super scary. And in my opinion, still kind of real given how big space is. There's a couple other movies that I think do the origin of a comet or a meteor hitting Earth and space specimens coming out. So that's probably one of my favorites.
That's good. I found the movie. Okay, it's called Contagion, and it's
that's
not
Contagion with Matt Damon.
No. Who's in Contagion? Oh yeah, he is in it. Holy crap!
I was and Jude Law.
Yep, and Jude Law and Lawrence Fishburne, and who's the actress? Gwyneth Paltrow. There it is. Yeah.
I was how you're I'm Matt Damon. You're he's not in. I'm I know this movie, Kevin.
I just forgot he was in it. Sometimes I just push Matt Damon out of my memories. I don't have enough space for him up there.
Oh my God,
there's only so many people who can be in my memories.
You don't want Jason Bourne and The Martian in your brain?
No. You know what I actually liked? This is a funny. I liked Jeremy Renner more than Jason Bourne. And I love how in the beginning, just to try to get everybody to forget about Jason Bourne, they're like, he beat Jason Bourne's record, in the first part of that movie. I forget what it was. The Bourne, not Ultimatum, the Bourne Legacy. Did you see that one with Jeremy Renner?
Jeremy Renner, yeah.
Yeah. I love that movie and hate that movie because he just keeps blending into crowds with that. Like, it's one of those movies where it's like, it's like, there's cameras everywhere. Do you have a hat?
Like, and sunglasses, but big sunglasses.
Nobody can find us if we got a hat and sunglasses. Anyway, so yeah, no, I like Contagion, but it's not a zombie film. But that's how a lot of zombie film, but it's a zombie film in spirit, right? In that the contagion spreads and it's essentially zombifying people like that, but it's a viral reaction. So, and that's another funny thing about like Resident Evil is, once again, that's a viral reaction. So if we're going for like proper zombie, right? You've got franchises like Walking Dead, Day of the Dead, Dawn of the Dead, Army of the Dead, Shaun of the Dead, just like, and these are the ones where people are dying and then coming back 28 days later, right? But once again, 28 days later, that's kind of more of a viral thing. It's there's when there's another thing that's hijacking the body, I think although you could call them zombies and you could label it as a zombie type film, right? Like, it kind of falls into that relative category of zombie. They aren't zombies themselves in the film. You're watching people who have a virus. You're watching people who are hijacked by mushrooms. You're watching people who have been taken over by some weird bat-related disease in a pig. But that's what they are. They're disaster movies about a virus or, some sort of pathogen or parasite rather than an actual zombie film, right? And going back to what we were talking about earlier, there's, you've got I Am Legend, right? And that pays tribute to the old vampire zombie mythology in that, like, they can't go out in the daylight, right? But a lot of them are relatively zombified, right? Like, at least where they start is they are zombies. And then as they're forming a culture, they start to bring out some of the more human side. But I would still say that in the beginning outbreak is definitely like zombie style,
Absolutely. I also think that the I Am Legend, I'm curious to see what they do with the sequel that they're now doing with Will Smith and I think Michael B. Jordan. One of the things that I like about I Am Legend the most, and it's also one of the things I like about The Last of Us the most, is the initial outbreak scene and the chaos. I feel like what a lot of outbreak movies miss the mark on is how intense, if all of that went. Like, I think The Last of Us does it really, really well, where it's just like, boom, shit's hit the fan. Like, it's just out of nowhere. Like, it's not like gradual. It's just like all of a sudden everybody's turning, planes are falling from the sky, cars are crashing. You know what I mean? Like, utter chaos. And I love seeing that because I think chaos scenes are so cool. As a big fan of chaos.
I agree. Yeah, disaster films.
Yeah.
Chaos.
And I think that I Am Legend one works really well too because, spoiler alert if you haven't seen the 2008 movie I Am Legend, but the helicopter with his family when it blows up.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I expected his family to have been turned, but like somehow in a movie where people are getting eaten alive and turning into monsters, the fact that they're on a plane getting away and then they die.
Yeah. And he watches it. Yeah.
That's a bad day.
Have you watched Love, Death, and Robots?
Some episodes here.
Okay. Season 3, they have a really amazing short. It's 5 minutes long. I've watched it probably 100 times. I showed it to Caden. And he every once in a while he'll be like, "Can we watch the zombie thing?" And it's called Night of the Mini Dead, and it's like, it looks like it's mostly like clay animated style, but it's CG. And it just shows a zombie outbreak starting and like how it escalates, and over the course of like 3 to 5 minutes, this short film, there's this really funny moment where like it just cuts to a scene of the White House and you just hear a phone pick up and you hear zombies, not in our country, and then like they just start bombing cities and like it escalates from there. Oh, it's so good. It's such a great
I haven't seen
short.
That one. I have to watch it. What's it called?
Since you haven't watched it, I'm not going to tell you how it ends because it's amazing. And like every time we watch it, Caden is just like cackling to himself on the couch. I absolutely love it. He loves that little like comedic zombie thing.
What was it called?
It's called Night of the Mini Dead, I think. It's really good.
Yeah, Mini Dead. You got yeah.
Yeah, Night of the Mini Dead. That one's really good. But okay, so I did want to like touch on this a little bit more because I really do. I like how prolific zombies are, and I like how different the genres can be. And like I told you, I'm playing my zombie deck today in Magic the Gathering when I go down to Flipside to go play with some friends. And I built that deck because I was like, I think it was the second deck I ever built for Magic the Gathering, and it's just because like I was like, I like zombies, so let's just do zombie stuff. And the thing that I like about zombies is as a type. So here's a cool thing. You'll actually really appreciate this. Magic the Gathering has changed the word tribal, which used to be like you used to have tribes, right? So like humans were a tribe, birds were a tribe. You could build tribal decks, right? Elves were a tribe. But in order to be more specific, they've changed tribal to typal because it's a type, right? It's a type of creature, not a tribe. And I love that they've done that. But so what they've done is zombie as a typal creature, their cards very specifically, if you were playing against another type, right? So like if I was playing against elves, they wouldn't have as much of an effect. But playing against humans specifically, they have effects. Like they have destroy all non-zombie creature type cards, but then they also have cards that care very much about killing humans, which I love. And because there's different planes of existence in Magic the Gathering, you have Kaldheim, which is like very Norse inspired, and so you have Draugr there. You have cards like Dread Return. You have Blood on the Snow. You have Narfi, the King Betrayer, who represents an actual Norse myth about a Draugr king. And then like you go over to Innistrad, and you have your very like modern gothic type zombie stuff with Gisa and Geralf. And then they have an entire plane called Amonkhet, which is like based on Egyptian mythology. And so on Amonkhet, you actually have instead of mummies, because mummies are a different thing, but mummies are still labeled as a zombie type creature. You have actual zombies that exist in this like crazy desert place, and then eventually these Lazotep zombies, which are relatively indestructible, and you go to like almost any plane of existence and they have a type of zombie that exists there. And I think it's really cool that the creative team for this card game that's been out for 30 years keeps finding new ways to revisit zombie mythos and add a little bit of the flavor that's been added to it over time. Take a little bit of that and apply it to an inspirational plane of existence.
Yeah, the lore for MTG is pretty massive.
It's great.
I mean, yeah, it sounds
and I know
awesome.
too much of it. Well, that's how I got.
Wow.
That's how I got into it. Like, because I played as a kid, and then as I was getting, like, I remember they were like, "We're doing a D&D crossover," and I'd been playing D&D for like 6 years at this point, right? And Magic the Gathering's like, all right, I'm 5 years. And Magic the Gathering's like, we're doing a D&D crossover. And I was like, oh, hell yeah. So I went out and I bought the D&D crossover, and there were like a few zombie cards and stuff like that. And then I've noticed that there was another set that came out that was like metal / Norse inspired called Kaldheim. And I was like, oh, that's cool. I'll go buy some of those cards. And as I bought things, I was like, oh, there's actual lore behind this. There's stories here. I actually like this more than I like the cards even. I like the art and the story more than anything else, you know?
Yeah. No, I mean,
yeah,
I get that.
Yeah.
So let me ask you this then. As we swing her back around.
Let's swing her back around.
What is your favorite zombie movie?
Ooh, good one. I would definitely say I'm pre-inclined to just respond Shaun of the Dead because I love a good comedy horror, right? But if I was going to say proper zombie film, my favorite is, and this is tough, but I mean, I also kind of want to say The Corpse Bride. Like, what a good, reanimated corpse movie. Like,
That movie's bad.
there's so many. Huh?
That movie is bad.
It's not that bad. It's
Corpse
good. It's a
Bride?
good musical.
I don't like that.
Yeah, I like The Corpse
I
Bride.
don't like that movie.
Oh.
I'm not a fan.
All right, well that's fine. I think it's not that bad. I think it's a good dark kind of comedic like
I think I'm in the
relatively
minority.
dramatic thing.
I think most people.
Well, that's fine. But I don't proper. It's hard to pick because I tend to lean into the things that aren't proper zombie.
Yeah, you lean into a lot of things that aren't proper when it comes to this.
Yeah,
I'll tell you mine. I'll give
I-
you something to marinate.
Yeah.
In the 90s, there was a TV show called Spaced that starred Simon Pegg and Nick Frost.
Yeah.
In one of the episodes, they do a quick zombie vignette almost, right?
Mhm.
And Edgar Wright was involved in that show. And after
Yeah.
that episode, Simon Pegg and Edgar Wright, who were friends, were like, how freaking funny would it be if we wrote a zombie movie if it happened to like us and in Britain where there's no guns available to the public? And after years and years and years of storyboarding and writing and rewriting and studio and blah, 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 they were able to get Shaun of the Dead off the ground. Now, in that, Nick Frost was still a very, very, very new actor at the time in the early 2000s. And his first on-screen appearance was actually in the TV show Spaced with Simon Pegg and Edgar Wright. So Simon Pegg and Edgar Wright wanted to bring him in to play... You know Sean's friend's name in that movie?
No.
Ed.
Okay.
I spaced out for a second. Sorry. Long
You're
story
good.
short, they got Nick Frost in the movie with Edgar Wright and Shaun of the Dead. And why I think Shaun of the Dead is my favorite zombie movie, and it is my favorite zombie movie.
Oh, good. That was
because-
what I was pre-inclined to say. Okay.
And that's why I was like, because the thing about Shaun of the Dead that I think makes it so good is it is by itself, story, plot, characters, acting, directing, all of it, right? Great movie. Solid through and through. Then you add in the fact that there are dozens of homages to Night of the Living Dead, Dawn of the Dead, and Day of the Dead from George A. Romero, as well as other zombie media that helped bring zombies to the spotlight to carve and pave the way for Shaun of the Dead. It just takes it. It's easily, to me, the best zombie movie because of all the lovely homages it does and references it does in a very tasteful way, as well as standing on its own two legs as a good movie through and through in the zombie culture.
Yeah. Here's the question. Do you consider Evil Dead and Army of the Dead to be zombie movies?
No.
Yeah.
Because Deadites are demons. So no.
Oh, true. Okay. Yep. All right. See? But once again, like a lot of people would watch that and they'd be like, it's a zombie film, right?
Yeah. I can see
But
that.
it's really a possession film.
Yeah. Because Deadites,
Interesting.
different.
Yeah, because they're demons. That's funny. I also, you know what I really like, and we haven't even talked about. I love the first Zombieland. Like, what a fun movie.
Yes.
That just I love that they explain the rules. I love that it still maintains a lot of the zombie film qualities, but has funny moments. The best moment of the entire film, I think, is Bill Murray. Like.
Yeah,
I love that he explains that he's been surviving because he's just been moving around slowly. Like,
I think Zombieland and Zombieland 2 are really are pretty solid. Not my favorite.
Zombieland 2 is okay. I like
But they're good.
Zombieland more. But
the first one's so good.
Yeah, the first one's solid. I love the MacGuffin of the Twinkie. You know, like just it's so great.
And they do expire.
So the funniest thing is like I would say my two favorite, like if you were to ask me off the rip what my favorite zombie films are, I would be listing horror comedies first and foremost, right? Like that would be my initial inclination. But if you were to let me think further, I would mention possibly one of Jason Statham's greatest performances ever. Ghosts of Mars. John Carpenter's space zombie demon
Not zombie.
Epic.
But I see where you're going.
I mean, there's zombies. There's definitely people who die and come back.
What about, spoiler alert, the zombies in Ahsoka? Zombie stormtroopers.
I
That's a
like that
comic.
they did that.
You know it's a comic.
I like
Do you
that
know
that
about that comic?
exists now. No.
Do you know the comic? Okay, let me tell you about this real quick.
No.
Because
Yeah, hit me.
okay. Oh, I thought you said no, like to me telling you about it. I was like, fine, I won't tell you about it. I actually
No,
have
I just
two
don't know
comics.
about it.
I have two comics real quick. I wanna drop. So the zombie stormtroopers, and I can't remember what. It's been so long. I've only read that comic like twice. There's a it's like called the Black something. There's an actual basically stormtroopers on an outpost in the Outer Rim.
Yes.
The Empire was working on like serums and things like that to kind of like help them, continue to take over.
Mm-hmm.
It went wrong and it turned the stormtroopers into Death Troopers. That's what they're called. Death Troopers. Or Dark Troopers or something like that. And they're zombies. And basically it's just like this little story, this little pocket condensed story that nobody thought was canon. And I guess technically that is still not canon. But I love the way that in Ahsoka they were like, okay, well, the way they did it in the comic book is a little weird, but like Dathomir and the sisters and the witches, like that is all, like if you've watched the Clone Wars, like they use magic and it's not the Force. Like everyone's like, well, they're just using the Force. It's not the Force. It's legit.
It's not
like
the Force, yeah.
It's different. So the fact that they can use their magic to bring the stormtroopers back to life, I was like, that's cool. That's a good way to take this really weird story and make it work.
Yeah. Dude, I could talk about Ahsoka a lot because first off, that last episode sucked, but it probably fell apart because R.I.P. Ray Stevenson, very sad.
Well, actually, okay, hold on,
And,
wait. Time out 1 second, because I've actually come around on the ending to Ahsoka, the last episode, because there's one crucial scene that really, 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 really changes so much.
All right, let's talk about it not on the podcast, but it did my least favorite thing, which is what Game of Thrones did. Oh, also, honorary mention about zombies. The White Walkers in Game of Thrones are proper zombies. They are zombies from the north. They're influenced once again by Norse mythology. They're from the north of an ice wall. They actually have a zombie king. He was a dude who was killed and quite literally comes back as the Night King, right? And they even have this thing called the Long Night. And in the books, it's amazing how they like George R.R. Martin does such a great job describing like zombie bears and stuff, like all this stuff that can just come back from the dead as essentially a zombie version. It's not necessarily stronger for natural means. Some of them have magic included. Like, yeah, I can't believe I didn't even mention that. Like the White Walkers and they're the first thing. It's the first scene of Game of Thrones. There's White Walkers. And then like, oh man, and like going back to the Ahsoka thing, they built up this this seemingly unstoppable foe throughout so much of that series, and then it fell apart so hard. And I really, 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 really can't wait for the books to come out. And I hope that they're so much better because the zombies are one of the best parts about it. Okay.
I don't know anything about Game of Thrones, so.
Well, you should, Odie.
You're going to tell me about it next month.
Yes, fine. I will. You know how hard that's going to be?
You're
how
the one
hard?
that suggested it. You're the one
I'll
that said,
do it.
Hey, remember how last season I told you all about Lord of the Rings and you told me all about Star Wars?
No, I told you about
Let's do it
Lord
on
of the
this
Rings
season.
and you told me about Star Wars.
That's what I literally just said, Kevin.
Okay.
And then you were like, this season, I'm going to tell you all about Game of Thrones, and you can tell me all about something, but it can't be Star Wars. And I said, that's okay, because I already know what I'm going to tell you about, and
Game
it's
of
not
Thrones
Star Wars.
It's so hard, but I'm going to do it. I'm going to
do mine. Mine's going to be hard, too, but I'm going to do it.
Game of Thrones, actually, it's not that hard. All right.
Last comic book that I want to mention real quick, because I think it's really cool. This isn't zombie-related, but because I don't know where else to plug this. Early 2003, maybe 2005, Freddy versus Jason. Remember that movie?
Mm-hmm.
So there was going to be a sequel called Freddy versus Jason versus can you guess?
Zombies.
Ash.
Oh!
So, because you mentioned Ash versus the Evil Dead, Evil Dead. Real quick, there's a comic, 6 issues or 6 things of Ash versus Freddy versus Jason, which is the comic book adaptation of what that sequel would have been. And if you want to see 3 horror icons battle it out as a sequel to Freddy versus Jason, not a bad comic book available online.
You know what my favorite proper zombie movie is? And we once again, dude, we failed this.
There's so
my
many
God.
zombie movies, though.
No. Train to Busan. Like,
Oh, fuck.
yeah, thank you. Yeah, wow. All right, cool. We failed. We didn't even mention Train to Busan, which is like the best zombie
Oh my
movie
God.
ever.
You know what other one we missed?
What?
Pride, Prejudice, and Zombies.
And
with Matt
Zombies.
Smith. Ugh.
It seems like there are some technical difficulties. I guess we're going to have to play some elevator music. What happened? Yeah, you're back. All right. I don't know what happened. All right. What were you saying?
So what I was saying when you lost me was, you are correct. Train to Busan. Shaun of the Dead moves down to number 2 because Train to Busan is the best zombie movie. It is
we agree.
fantastic through and through.
Great.
Yeah, no, 100%. I have to move Shaun of the Dead down to number 2.
Yeah.
We even talked about this in our best horror movies. Like, I was like, Train to Busan is one of my favorites.
Yeah.
Honestly, and we're gonna get to it in What's Your Jam. I've watched so many horror movies this week that my brain is just like, and I did research and I was trying to remember, because I don't know, everything I just told you about George A. Romero is just from memory. So I hope that's accurate.
I hope so too.
We'll find out.
Yeah, I mean, we can do What's Your Jam in a second. My brain is a little bit fried because I went and saw Rocky Horror Picture Show the other night, and then I saw Little Shop of Horrors last night. So I've just been like going to theater events all week, and like between work and that and all the other stuff, like my brain is just like, it's complete mush at this point today. But yeah. So what is your jam, Odie? And I forgot to get mine last week, so I have 2 metal jams this week.
Oh, well, I'm gonna say that in terms of music, I'm gonna skip music this week.
Okay.
I'm gonna say movies. So here's the movies that I watched this week for spooky season.
Yep.
Ghostbusters.
Great.
Ghostbusters 2.
Great.
Okay, so I love the first Ghostbusters. I've seen it like 12+ times.
Yeah. This
is only my 3rd time watching Ghostbusters 2, and it's bad.
Yeah, it is bad.
It's not good.
Yeah.
It's bad.
Yeah.
We watched Scream. Have you seen not Scream, fucking Smile? Have you seen Smile?
Yeah, I love Smile. Yeah.
Smile is really good.
Smile is good.
I have complaint. My complaint with Smile is that, spoiler alert, I'm going to try not to spoil it, but just in case I'm going to say spoiler alert, I feel like the fake out ending, because there's always a fake out ending.
Yeah.
I feel like if you remove the fake out ending, then that movie is a lot better, because then the message is battling your mental health and like working on your mental health and like coming out on top. But instead, I feel like the studio was like, well, that's not a very good ending. We need it to be,
Yeah. Scary.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that was unfortunate.
Yeah.
Scream 2. We watched Scream 1 last week. We watched Scream 2 this week.
Yep.
And then we watched, what was that other? Oh, we watched Over the Garden Wall this week.
Oh, the best. I mean, that's my fall jam forever and ever. Always going to be my fall jam is Over the Garden Wall. I absolutely love it. Like, you can't. Oh, I watch it every season.
That was my first time watching it all the way through.
It's so good. Yeah, so my jams this week, I'm very much so Johnny Booth, local New York hardcore band, released a new album, and they started doing this cool thing where I'm going to make them my jam for 2 weeks. Because they started doing this cool thing. They did an album called First Hand Accounts forever ago, like 2017. I say forever ago. Like 2017, I think, 2018 maybe. They did this album called First Hand Accounts, and they started doing, I guess, like they're kind of digging into their punk roots, and it's very anti-nationalist propaganda, right? So a lot of the album is about like the strife and pain that you can experience as an American citizen. And then this album just builds on it. Like this new album, it just came out this year. It's called Moments Elsewhere. And even the cover, it's a little girl looking up at a disco ball as a guy in a hazmat suit takes another person in a hazmat suit on a stretcher out of a living room, like just a normal old school looking living room. And so like just the imagery there already is like, oh, something's going on here. But then they have this song on this album called The Ladder, which is like big recommendation. Like if you like hardcore, if you like metal, listen to the song The Ladder followed by The Mirror, because the song itself almost describes like this ambition that we have to climb a social ladder in America that so many people seem to like propagate. Like, you know, you got to have Motivation Monday and you got to be going all the fucking time.
Yeah.
And then the sort of like the penultimate moment of that song is almost like letting go and falling from the ladder. And then what's at the bottom of the ladder is but the mirror. You have to face your actual self. It's almost like you've been climbing away from it this whole time. You fall back down and then there's a mirror there. And I love when people can do that. I love when like music has proper music theory and it combines all of these elements and paints a picture. Like music can paint a picture when done properly, you know, and they just do such a good job of that with a genre that's known for being so raw and emotional, you know?
Oh, 100%.
Yeah. So big recommendation on that. Final thoughts?
A lot of zombie movies out there that I feel have attempted to do things different with the genre.
Yep.
From fast zombies to smart zombies
Yeah.
to space zombies
Yeah.
to Nazi zombies to all kinds of stuff. I think Overlord.
Is that a zombie film?
I would consider it. They're experimenting. Nazi zombies.
Okay.
You know, it's got Wyatt Russell.
I
Kurt
like
Russell's son.
Overlord.
It's good. I saw it in
good.
theaters. It's a
Yeah.
good movie.
I did too.
I think the idea. I also there's what is Dead Snow, which is,
that's Nazi zombies too.
Yep. I think that the thing that I think I like about zombies, right, is at the end of the day, is it my favorite category of horror movie? No, definitely not, because it's not scary. Zombies will never be scary to me. They're never gonna be frightening or like a terrifying presence in a movie, because that's the whole point of a movie, right? The whole point of the movie is that the zombie is the terrifying presence. Zombie movies, to me, are not only the most fun to like see what you can do with it,
Yeah.
but they're also the one where you can get the most experimental. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Like, if you wanted, like, we mentioned briefly the movie Cooties, right?
Yeah.
That movie is about a zombie outbreak at an elementary school with Elijah Wood.
Yeah. No, it's great.
And Rainn
I like
Wilson.
Cooties.
And
Cooties
Rainn
is funny.
Wilson.
Yeah.
It's got Frodo and Dwight fighting fifth graders. And it's, if you're like, well, they're probably not going to kill. Yeah. No,
they're gonna.
You know how that, like, everyone's like, how many fifth graders could you fight? Well, they find out.
You're going to find out.
And, like, I love that. I think that, you know, you mentioned, like, comedy zombie movies are hilarious. Shaun of the Dead, Cooties, so forth. Like, serious ones, experimental ones. You know, I know we said that The Last of Us isn't zombies, but, you know, I like to think that the reason The Last of Us is here is because of the zombie culture. Because somebody looked at that and goes, you know, how can we change it up? So I think, as a whole, the zombie genre is just, it's just fun, and that's all it is to me, and all it probably ever will be. It's just fun.
Yeah.
The idea of it is fun. In real life, shooting myself right away. On screen, fun as hell.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I'm with you on that. I would definitely say, you know, we both agree. Like, number one, Train to Busan, so good, one of the best zombie films ever. Number two, Shaun of the Dead, because what a good twist on the genre. But then, yeah, you're right. There's so many good ones. There's, you know, you've got Cooties, and then you've got the things that vaguely fall into zombie films. And just like vampires, you know, like zombies are, they're a creature, they're a subgenre, they're kind of they're like their own genre. You know, they all fall into horror film. And it's so interesting because it all comes back to this. You know, like going back to where we even started, it comes back to this fear that something dead might come back, right? And it like going all the way back to Gilgamesh, like what I would call it the original horror story, right? Like the dead come back in Gilgamesh, and it is not a good thing. And that I think instilled in human culture as that myth moved around and as it took on new life in different cultures. It instilled a level of fear in us. So I think zombies and vampires and the things that we've been talking about, they're at a very visceral, intuitive level of fear for us as humans, right? That's why they come out at night. That's why it was originally Night of the Living Dead,
Night
right?
of the Living Dead.
Right, and then as we've gotten over time, we're like, well, zombies actually, they don't have a problem in the daylight, so you're just not safe anymore. And I love that we've evolved, and that culture has changed and shifted, and they've become their own thing. They have their own space that they occupy now.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's my final thought. I don't even have a joke for the end of this. I know we normally are just riffing and joking, but at the end of this, I don't have any joke. Do you think zombies are the best monster mashers? I guess that's the farthest I can get with this.
So, common misconception is that people like Jason and Freddy and Michael Myers could be considered zombies because technically they died, right? Yeah. But the only thing that has truly died is the fact that we do not have a joke to end this podcast. I don't have anything. That's all I got.
Yep. You know what the scariest zombie is? Michael Jackson.
Yeah.
I'm just
Sorry, that was unintentional.
There it is.
That was such an unprompted. I'm like,
I'm glad that was your actual reaction. Well, he was a zombie. Oh my god.